When it comes to troubleshooting drivability or starting problems on today's high-tech vehicles, a lot of people just figure, well, I can't work on it, and so I'm just going to have to take it into the shop. Well, that's all well and good when it comes to the shop owner's pocketbook, but oftentimes it isn't very easy on yours. That's what Car Care Seminar is all about, saving you money by helping you learn how to perform the repairs on your own vehicle in a manner that will not only save you that money, but it'll help you do the repairs the right way and the safe way the first time and every time. Hi, I'm Scott Cusey, and I'll be your narrator and host as we take a look at troubleshooting a vehicle that won't start due to a lack of fuel. Now, that used to be a pretty easy and straightforward process back when I started working on vehicles. Of course, that's when mechanical fuel pumps, carburetors, and even point-type ignition systems were popular. But today's highly advanced, electronically controlled vehicles pose a new challenge for all of us. I'm still a believer in the do-it-yourself for handling these challenges, but it seems like the hardest part is either knowing where to get started or where to locate the information that you need to perform the task. Now, as I just mentioned, this videotape will cover a logical progression of the items to check and replace if your vehicle will crank, but it won't start due to a fuel system problem. During this chapter, I'll show you the tools needed to perform the repairs and troubleshooting demonstrated on the tape. Chapter 2 will cover some of what I call the basic checks that should really be performed to determine the nature of the problem. Engines need two very basic items in order to run: spark and fuel. Once you've determined that the cause of the no-start condition is a fuel system-related problem, our first place to inspect will be the fuel filter. In Chapter 3, we'll demonstrate how to replace the fuel filter on many carbureted type of vehicles. In Chapter 4, we'll look at replacing an inline type of fuel filter common on many carbureted and fuel-injected vehicles. As we continue to troubleshoot the cause of our loss of fuel, Chapter 5 will cover an item commonly found on Ford vehicles called the inertia switch. The inertia switch is used to turn off the electric fuel pump in case of an accident. A nice safety feature, but it doesn't take much of an impact to trip one, so we'll not only look at where to find the inertia switch on Ford vehicles, but we'll also show you how easy it is to reset it. Since we'll be covering several years of vehicles, Chapter 6 will cover testing a mechanical type of fuel pump, while Chapter 7 will demonstrate how to replace a typical mechanical fuel pump. In Chapter 8, we'll be covering the testing of an electric in-tank fuel pump and its relay, a system more commonly found on fuel-injected vehicles. Chapter 9 will demonstrate the proper removal and replacement of that in-tank electric fuel pump as we continue tracing back the source of our fuel problem. Chapter 10 will take us to an item that you may not think has anything to do with the fuel system. That is the oil pressure switch. The oil pressure switch on some vehicles must be correctly operating as the power supply to the electric fuel pump passes through the oil pressure switch during cranking. Therefore, a faulty switch could create a no-start problem. Oil pressure switch locating and some tips for replacement will be covered in this chapter. The remaining 8 chapters will be aimed more directly at vehicles that are equipped with electronic fuel injection. Chapter 11 will discuss fuel pressure regulator testing, commonly found on fuel-injected vehicles, and, in a follow-up to that, we'll demonstrate replacement of a typical fuel pressure regulator in Chapter 12. There are also 2 basic types of fuel injection used. One type is throttle body injection, or TBI, or central fuel injection, CFI, where one injector feeds all of the cylinders of the same engine. Or the other type is multi-port fuel injection, that has one injector for each individual cylinder. And there are actually synchronized and non-synchronized versions of each, but we're not going to have to get into that. In Chapters 13 and 14, we'll test and troubleshoot problems with a throttle body style of injection, as well as the correct procedure for injector replacement. In Chapters 15 and 16, we'll troubleshoot problems with multi-port fuel injectors and demonstrate typical replacement procedures for that style of injection. In our final 2 chapters, my good friend Jim Bates from Wells Manufacturing will be joining us when we talk about testing and replacing Hall effect switches. Hall effect switches can be used for the timing of the spark on the ignition system or can be used for the injector pulse signal for the fuel injection system. That pretty much wraps up the areas that we'll be discussing on this tape. So now, why don't we just move over to the bench where I've got some of the tools laid out that we're going to use during the tape for not only the repairs but also the troubleshooting. Now, everyone pretty much realizes that you're going to have a pretty good selection of basic hand tools to work on your vehicle. Some examples of that include combination wrenches, both metric and standard, shallow and deep well socket sets, again, probably metric and standard, Phillips and flat blade screwdrivers, a pair of safety glasses, a set of metric and standard tubing wrenches, some shop towels and hand cleaner for cleaning up afterwards, and a floor jack and a set of jack stands for any of those procedures that may take you underneath the vehicle. Now, let's look at some of the more specialized tools that you might need. You know, Torx bits are becoming a real popular type of fastener for a lot of different items on today's vehicles. So you'll most likely need a set of Torx bits that range from a size 10 through at least a size 50. Now, since we'll be concentrating mostly on the fuel system, here's a special line disconnect tool used mainly on Ford vehicles. They use a special connection on some fuel lines, transmission lines, and air conditioning lines that require the use of a tool like this to separate them. Another common troubleshooting tool is a hand vacuum pump, mainly used to check vacuum diaphragms and vacuum-related switches and relays. Now, fuel system testing also commonly requires the use of a fuel pressure tester. One like this can be used for carbureted vehicles, but you'll need a high-pressure tester like this for working on fuel-injected vehicles. You're also going to need a handheld digital volt ohm meter for testing the electrical circuits involved with the fuel system, and it's also a good idea to have a couple of jumper leads around too. Now, for certain tests, especially on throttle body injected vehicles, you might need a timing light and another item that's called a Noid light. The Noid light is used to check the electrical circuit leading to the fuel injector nozzle. Now, here's an item that isn't found very often in toolboxes anymore, but it can sure come in handy for troubleshooting, and that is a stethoscope. It can help identify where certain sounds are coming from and if it's the right sound that you're actually looking for. We'll use this for